Hello, everybody. This is Michelle, and I'm a little early, but I watched my movie, and I wanted to do this while it was like fresh in my mind. I am doing a synopsis about the movie that the professor chose, and it was The Good Doctor. Um, that role was played, or the person that played the doctor, his name was Orlando. I'm sorry here. Let me get to my note here. His name was Orlando Bloom. He was the person that played in the movie as a good doctor. And I have a lot of notes here, so I know I only have 8 minutes, but I wanted to make sure that I kind of covered everything. So we're supposed to do four unethical, or give four unethical things that we saw through the movie, and there were so many of them. Again, the movie that I watched was called The Good Doctor, and I am doing a synopsis about what I saw and some of the information I deciphered from the movie. So, just a brief little thing. The Good Doctor is about a doctor who is doing his um, intern at the hospital, and he is very eager about going over or going to another part, disease management or something of that sort. And he is assigned a patient who is a teenager. She's 18 years old, and she is suffering from kidney failure. So at the very beginning of the movie, the doctor has other patients. The first patient that he came encounter with was a person that couldn't speak English. Um, and what I saw there was he was doing reviewing some information with the patient, and the patient was trying to explain to him what was going on. However, he was speaking in another language, which I believe was Spanish. Instead of the doctor trying to find someone who could probably assist him with that to make sure that he was getting the information or understanding what the patient was explaining to him, because that's very important. He didn't do that. He started changing the notes, putting in fictitious information, and just went on by what he thought the patient may have been was saying. And lo and behold, the patient ended up getting a reaction because he gave him penicillin. And throughout the movie, there's a nurse that he interacts with that is very concerned about the way he writes his notes, the way that he engages in patients with patients, because his communication level wasn't very good. So the first issue that I saw, that is moral integrity. That is the process of consistently applying virtue and practical wisdom to make ethical decisions. At no point through the movie did he do that. When the first patient that he came encounter with, he was changing the paperwork. He didn't try to find anybody that could help him with that to make sure that he was getting the correct information. In other words, the patient didn't speak English. He didn't try to get anybody that in the hospital that could either interpret what he was saying. He just went and treated the patient without trying to find out exactly what was going on. So as the movie goes on, he finally, again, the actual real bigger part of the movie was when the patient, the teenager, is admitted to the hospital for kidney failure. So she's a teenage patient. She's 18 years old. Her family is there with her, and he starts treating her. And I did a little research on the movie and tried to find out what the actual where it was going, or why he was engaging with her this way. If he just either was infatuated with her, or maybe because he was, crossing a boundary. To me, it was very unclear what was going on there. But what was very clear is that he didn't set any boundaries. There were no boundaries when he saw this patient. First of all, he was engaging with the family and the patient inappropriately. He didn't set any boundaries. He was changing information to fit whatever he thought that was going to fit in his need of whatever he was trying to do. So he's in the first time that he meets the the patient, which is a younger patient. He's treating her. He's talking to the family. He engages in inappropriate conversations. And I saw that as moral integrity, which I meant that he's not ethically thinking of what he's saying and how he's engaging with the patient, let alone engaging with the patient's family. As time goes on, the patient ends up leaving the hospital, and because the family and the patient, they are so I guess, amazed at how he treated her. They invite him over to the house for dinner, and he goes over there to the house for dinner, which was another big issue. He didn't, that was ethically not appropriate to engage with patients in their way. Again, he didn't follow boundaries. There was a personal morality, which means an individual or his personal morale compass, which a person interfere with him making right decisions on how he was going to interact with patients. And I'm losing time, and I'm trying to get it all in 8 minutes. So as the time goes on, he goes is invited to the patient's house. The parents invite him over. She's not there because she does have a boyfriend, and I don't think he liked that too much, that she had a boyfriend, because it seemed like he was going somewhere with her. And I don't know if it was control. I don't know if it was. The movie says that he ends up falling in love with her or something, but it was quite hard to kind of determine that again. So anyway, he's at the house. He goes into the bathroom, and he starts changing her medication. So he goes in the bathroom. He changes the medication because he can't see this girl because she's never home when he gets invited over to the house. So he changes the medication. She ends up getting sick and coming back to the hospital. So that actually put her back into the hands of him. And here we go again with my second unethical issue was deceit, because the whole time he deceived her, and he was changing her medication. She was getting sicker. He was changing her IVs, changing the orders. He was a doctor. He was engaging with the nurse and making it seem that the nurse wasn't doing what she was doing. He was making all these distractions, but he was actually the one creating the situation. So the next unethical issue I found in our reading is evil, and it said the intentional or unintentional actions that cause human suffering and destroy dignity. So I really, this one I think really fit, because he was going out of his way. This girl ended up getting sicker. She ended up getting sicker because he was changing the medicine. He was changing the IVs. I don't know if he was changing them to water or what he was doing, but he was making a change to all the medication, so she was not getting treated and she was not getting better. So, while she was in the hospital, and it was funny, her parents weren't there the whole time. So as time goes on, as he's changing the medication and she's not getting the right medication, all of a sudden she is removed from the room. She's taken to ICU. She's in cardiac arrest, and she has a heart attack and dies. So out of the whole entire movie, there was an administrator when they were going over some of the, having a briefing throughout of the day of patients that they dealt with and stuff like that. None of these issues was never addressed. Even when the patient died, none of them was addressed. None of the administrators made any question any his interactions with the patient or nothing, except for there was an orderly who found the patient's diary, and she had written in her diary about the doctor and her engagement with them. And so this orderly, he starts to blackmail the doctor, and he blackmails him, and he tells him that he paying him off by keeping his mouth closed about this diary by pain medication. So again, here we go with the deceit. The doctor, he goes to the extent, he starts tainting medication. He ends up creating a medication that the orderly ends up taking, actually, when the orderly ends up taking that medication, because it was actually, he started mixing the medication or making pills, it was potassium cyanide, and it kills him. So, long story short, the last one I thought was a really big issue with this movie was case management. At no time did any of the administrators, even in any of the meetings, think that there was anything wrong with this. He was never questioned about the way he engaged with the patient, how he was treating her, why this treatment wasn't working. None of them saw it. They were just going exactly by what he was saying. I took that as, kind of the wrong thing to do, simply because this girl lost her life under the hands of him, and that's also what we call non-malfeasance. And it was never caught. Nothing happened. And he continued to do it. So, in other words, he gets engaged with the patient that comes in, the teenager. He ends up changing her medication. She comes into the hospital. He keeps changing her IVs. He keeps changing her medication. She ends up dying. So the orderly, he finds her diary, and then he starts to blackmail the doctor. The doctor gets afraid that he's going to get in trouble, so he starts paying off the orderly with medications, and those medications that he pays off the orderly with, he's tainting them. And he tainted those with cyanide, which killed a second person that he killed. So at the ending of the movie, he is approached by detectives who are questioning him. He's in the apartment. He has a diary. He's trying to flush that to for the detective not to see it. And again, he's called back into the hospital. The administrative staff, which is I guess the doctor that was over him, none of this information is discussed. Nothing was asked about were there any uh, clues or anything that he could have done, and nothing. And again, my last one is professional ethics. There's a code of ethics that we all in the healthcare field are supposed to follow. None of those were followed. Everything in this movie crossed boundaries. It crossed ethical boundaries. Nobody made any comment. Nobody, even the nurse, she wrote an incident report when he first gave the very first patient, prescribed him penicillin, because he didn't find anybody that spoke Spanish to speak to the patient that could tell him exactly what the patient was trying to tell him. The patient may have been trying to tell him in that first interaction that he was allergic to penicillin, but because the doctor did not find anybody that could speak Spanish, he was just changing the paperwork and just going for it. So this happened throughout the movie. It was a very good movie. It brought up a lot of things, and just wanted to make sure, because I am always, as always, a little nervous, that I'm real clear of what the four things that I saw that really stood out to me in the movie, as far as on the ethical end. And the four things that I chose that on the ethical end, and I'm just trying to get to my, was the first one was moral integrity. There was nothing. The hospital could have been at risk, well, was at big risk, but they never got caught, because after he killed the orderly, he went right back to work. The second one I thought was deceit. He did everything that he could to hide what he was doing, the paperwork, the medication that he was changing, the diary that the patient was writing in, that they could have found out that he was engaging with her inappropriately. The next one was evil. And that is also one I found in the book, where it's an intentional on unintentional actions that cause human suffering and destroy dignity. And this was actually a destruction of human suffering, because the teenager, she was in that hospital for almost maybe a week before she ended up going in cardiac arrest and died. And then the father actually came to the hospital and accused him of killing her. It was kind of hard to figure out where that came into play, but he got away with it, even after the orderlies blackmailed him, because he found the diary and Then he started selling the medication or paying off the orderly to keep his mouth closed with the medication, but he ends up dying as well. So the last one I thought is case management. The meetings that they had each week or throughout the day or about patients that he wasn't dealing with, nothing was mentioned. The administrators always said, "Oh, you're a good doctor." Actually, this movie should have been called The Bad Doctor because he was a very bad doctor. He crossed all the T's, all the I's to keep himself from getting caught for about all the things that he was doing and how he was engaging with patients unethically, inappropriately, and was a reason for them suffering and actually ending up dying at the movie. I know this wasn't a true movie, but it was actually interesting to see that sometimes these things happen and nobody really pays attention, and it does happen. And I know we're only supposed to do 4 of these, but non-malfeasance is a very big one here because we are supposed to, as healthcare professionals, first to do no harm in healthcare. And to avoid unnecessary harm. And at no time in this movie did any of the health professionals, except for the nurse who was complaining about his handwriting and him not having the communication skills when dealing with patients, but that still wasn't addressed either. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I went over and I hope what I share was understandable. Once again, this was my synopsis on the movie that is called The Good Doctor and exercise in the week 4. So thanks everybody. I hope I was informative and thank you for taking the time to listen. Have a good day. Bye bye.